were lucky enough to be granted the participation in the Results Matter expansion project. In our earlier years of progressing through our curriculum and assessment, we actually used to do a very structured assessment with the children, very planned and organized and structured and pen and papered, and here's the skill we want to meet and here's where we're at. One of the biggest differences in the assessments we used to do and now Teaching Strategies goal is now it's more real, and it's definitely less pressuring because it's not a test. We're not sitting there measuring if you can build a tower stack of 5 blocks. We just took a picture of you building 5 blocks while you were playing. And we didn't sit down and do a test. Can you tear a paper? Can you draw a line? Can you do a dab of glue? We actually just took pictures of that during their daily activities. And so the other wonderful part to that is the kids aren't sitting there fidgeting going, well, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't sound like fun, or they can do it. They just didn't want to sit here and do it with you. And so if we are out here playing and we're doing it during activity time, we actually saw it, they really can do it. And so it's so much better than having them sit with us and check boxes. And we're documenting just their day, what they're doing. And we still see everything we need while they're doing all their activities. We're just not sitting them down to do it. We just look, watch, observe, and document. It's very authentic. We love it.
Thanks to your help on that. All right, let's see if I can get us back to our... Yes. So anything that you noticed in the video, you can flip those lights back up if you would, Walt. Anything you saw that gave you some ideas of how we might implement assessment on an ongoing basis in our centers? Anything that struck you?
Yeah, let them play in centers.
Yeah, they let them play in centers. Let them do what they would like to do and took notes as they played. Anything else? Okay. All right, we'll move on. Thanks for your response. So let's just talk briefly about assessment. If we're implementing it, if you've tried to implement it, if you are successful implementing it, what are some of the challenges with assessing? And what are some of the ways that you've overcome those challenges? You can enter your responses in the chat or raise your hand here. Quiet. Everybody's quiet on this one. Well, we've got some things here that we can see that the issues are similar to screening. They're just a bit more involved. We want to make sure that it's a tool that is appropriate for our children and families, that it's affordable. And I think the biggest thing is to figure out how to get my staff trained and how to allow staff time and effort to do the assessment on a regular basis. Yes?
Training, especially with the new All-Star requirements and cost of training.
Yep.
Keeping the child focused if you're doing one-on-one assessing.
Mm-hmm.
Time and training.
Yes. Yes. And those are some of the things as we adopt a training program in a center that we'll need to plan together for how to allow our staff time to do that. And if we do need to do some one-on-one work with children, how are we going to compensate with the other children in the classroom? Great questions. Again, you have lots of resources in your handout. If you're ready to implement an assessment program, please contact us or one of your coaches, and one of your regional training center staff as well are there with the kits ready to help you get going with training and implementation. We encourage you to do so.
And Carolyn, can I just say one thing? There are training incentives built into Kentucky All-Stars as well with the Race to the Top funding. So programs that are participating in Kentucky All-Stars can get a discount on training. So
Great.
Contact your coach and they can help you with that.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions thus far on screening or assessment before we move into the last portion of our day? Yes.
I have sort of a curiosity question as someone who doesn't work directly with kids. Like for for screening, when a child, what's the optimal time after a child enters the program to start doing screening? Because it seems like we want to know a little bit about the child, but then again, looking at some of these questions, there would be things that you might ask the child to do or
Okay,
be more directed.
so that's a good question. For those of you that are screening, when do you start the screening program?
I would say before they enter.
You can start even before they enter. Yep.
So like immediately you can start.
Or,
Yep.
You know they're coming, you pre-screen them.
Yeah.
Before they first enter.
Yes.
The online participants are asking, like, what is the conversation?
Yeah, that's why I repeated the question. How soon do we screen children in our centers? I gotcha. And the answer is possibly before they start. And the way we can start with a screen like the ASQ is when the parents come in to register, you can give them the appropriate screening form right then. Let them take it home and let them bring that back with a registration packet. That way we know from starting the ground running, at least where the parent perceives their child to be functioning and what areas we might want to work on. It's a great question. Any other questions on screening or assessment? Yes.
Like on the social emotional parts, do you all suggest or most centers have the parents fill it out or the teacher? Because we found that those can be very two different things.
It's designed, the ages and stages is designed to be given filled out by the parents. It's designed that way. Some centers are doing both. So really that's a center choice, but the tool is designed to be filled out by parents. And I think what I've seen happen is if we have some differences in how the parents are viewing concerns as opposed to how we view, that's a great opportunity to dialogue. I would say in most cases, the parents' concerns are the things that I work on, because even if I have a concern that's different from theirs, if they don't share my concern, when that child goes home, there's nothing going to happen on that front anyway. So I find that I get a better relationship with my families if I start where their concerns are, get their trust, as you all talked about, and then add in areas later. Once they trust me and they see, yeah, this person knows my child, wants what's best for my child, then maybe I'll consider this other area that the teacher has. That's why we start with families. Yes?
Does the ages and stages questionnaire go beyond 36 months?
Yes. Yeah, those are just samples for you. They go, the ages and stages.
Repeat the question.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you. The question was what are the ages for the ages and stages questionnaires? The ages and stages 3 goes up to 5.5 years, and the ages and stages social emotional goes up to 6 years. Those are just sample forms for today. Yeah. Yes.
A question from online. I'm a certified home provider and by myself. It's hard to do it all. What are some suggestions when you've got 5 other children you're caring for? It's
a great question. So a question, you can all hear that, I think. So what do we do if I'm a home provider and I have 6 children in my care, or if I'm a daycare teacher and I have 30 children in my care? How do I do a screen? And so what are some of the, and that's some of the great questions and challenges that we face. Any suggestions from you all how you figured out how to implement screening when you've got a whole classroom of children or a whole house full of children? What suggestions do you all have? What's worked?
Video, and then when you are playing, you could go back and observe your video.
You can video the children.
You can ask parents to come in early or late when there aren't other children there. That's what.
Yes. Ask parents to come in at off times or slow times if there are any. How else? I know as we've rolled out lots of different screening pilots through the Division of Child Care, what we find is that if the administration is behind a new program, a challenging program, like starting something new that takes staff time and effort, if the administration is behind it, if the director is behind it and is really enthusiastic and can roll it out and get buy-in from staff and families, that's the best way. If I try to impose a program on my teachers and families without their buy-in, it's going to be dead in the water. So the more advanced work we can do to say, this is a great program, it will help all of us, it'll help our children and our families and our teachers. The more buy-in we can get before we roll it out, I think the more success we'll have. And the more teachers and folks like, for instance, a home provider, if I'm committed to doing this screening program, then when the kids are napping or whenever I have a moment, and I realize there are like no moments free during the day, if I'm committed to seeing how my children are doing, then I will take the time and fill out a screen or look at what the parents have sent me back and take the time. What we've also heard from centers is that those that have gotten buy-in and have rolled out a screening program, what the teachers tell us is, I now know my kids better than I ever knew. And that's their incentive for doing it some more. When the teachers and the families see that this is actually helping them, they're more likely to participate. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, good. Other thoughts on how to implement something like this? It's really how do you institute change, right? It's about instituting change. And it's a positive change once we get folks on board. It's getting over that initial hurdle. Yes?
What do you do when a parent is not interested in the results of an assessment?
That happens. Sometimes parents might send us back the screening form and really they're not interested in the results, or we might have a full assessment done and they're not that interested in the results. Services to kids are up to families. If we assess a child for first steps, and I've done this personally, I've assessed a child for first steps, we present the records, and the family goes, thanks very much. See you in 3, they can close the door. They're allowed, we're allowed to choose what's important for our kids. And if first steps isn't something the family's ready for, then we say, thank you, call us when you're ready. We cannot force families to work on areas where they don't want to work. We can be open. We can establish trust and a relationship of respect. And if a family knows that I respect their decision to wait, when they're ready, they will come back. I had a family whose child we screened it too. I had grave concerns. And I said, let's, screen your child. They reluctantly, months later did the screen and they said, we appreciate what you said, but we're not worried. And I'm like, okay. So 2 years later, they came back and they said, we've taken our child for assessment. And now we're ready for services. Families get to choose. We all get to choose for our kids and for ourselves. So it's a great question. Others on screening and assessment? All right, so let's look at we're now going to delve into the area of working with our children in our centers for whom we have concerns or for whom they have diagnosed needs. The standard that applies here is implementing written developmental plans for individual children. So what are these individualized services? What do they look like in early care? If we have a child who's 1 to 3 years old, who's served through First Steps, they're going to have a written plan called an Individualized Family Service Plan. You'll hear us talk about IFSPs. That's when the child is eligible for services, they are getting services through First Steps, and they have a plan in place called an IFSP. Lots of those children are in our centers. And when I have a child in my center with an IFSP, I'd like to see the plan, I'd like to participate in that plan, and help implement the goals that the child is working on. For children that are 3 and older, who are in any form of public school preschool, whether they're at our center getting therapy or attending a preschool program, those children who are eligible for services will have an individual education plan or an IEP. And these are kids from 3 all the way up to 21. Again, you have lots of resources in your handout, more than we could begin to touch on today, but lots of resources for how to basically work with our children who have special needs. So let's talk about some of the things to begin. If I have a child come to my center who has a special need, I'm going to first of all let that family know I'm really excited to have them come to my center. I'm excited to have their child, and I'm excited to have their input as we work with the child. I want it to be a welcoming place. And centers know right off the bat if we're welcoming of all children or not, and it's important that we're welcoming. I want to attend those meetings. Lots of times child care workers are left out of the planning for these meetings. When I find out when they are, I'm going to work with my families and find out when those update meetings happen, and I'm going to attend if at all possible so that I can know what all the team knows and work with that child. We want to make sure that we protect the confidentiality of the children in our center. These plans are legally protected documents. So if I have a child who's on an IEP, I am not going to leave that paper out where anyone can see it except the people on the team who are listed on that paper. It's a confidential document, and I want to protect the parents' privacy and the child's privacy. So if parents ask me, you know, who's on a plan, there's no way I'm going to release any of that information. Parents can share what they want, but I cannot share which of my children get special services. So protect their confidentiality. I work with the therapists and the families as they come into the center. If I'm lucky enough to have therapists come to the center to work with the kids, I'm going to be right there watching and working with the therapist so she can teach me how to better serve that child. It's a key source of support. I'm also going to work with the families. Again, if we have a rapport and if we have a relationship of trust, they'll be willing to share with me what works and what doesn't work, and vice versa. I share with them what works and what doesn't work in school. I'm going to attend as many trainings as I can. If I have a child who comes to my center with a hearing loss, and I've never had a child with a hearing loss before, I'm going to get online and get as many trainings and as many face-to-face trainings as I can to learn how best to help that child. There's a wealth of training for you out there. There's lots of training. We have those online courses at UK. There's face-to-face. There's all kinds of conferences across the state. We encourage you to get out there and get to trainings that will help you better serve your children. And in terms of working with your kids with special needs, what challenges have you found, both here and online? What challenges have you found, and how have you overcome some of those challenges? Yes.
I have a child that screens off the charts for first steps, but he has major speech delays and doesn't qualify for first steps. He's 2 years old. What do you suggest?
Well, that's a good question. What do we do if a child, we send them to first steps, they get tested and they're not eligible and we still have concerns? What would we do? What would you all do?
I refer families to, like, just if you can't afford it, you know, go ahead and see a private therapist.
Okay.
Because we don't do first steps because we start at 3, but like if they don't qualify with the county, I try to explain, just because your child's not in the bottom 7% doesn't mean they won't benefit from speech services.
So refer them for private therapy. It's a great idea.
We would still like individualize that child's goals based off of our screening and assessment results that we've done.
Right. So individualize what we do. If we're screening and or assessing, we work with all of the kids with what we found out through that screening and assessment. Do you have another idea?
I didn't even think about so much stuff. But I have a child who is 4 years old, and I think the parents were afraid to try to get services for him. And he's just began seeing an OT. And I have a classroom of 12 kids. And he's pretty much the only kid that was seeing a therapist.
Okay.
And my challenge is to, where we're limited on staff, to really work with him individually and give him everything that he needs. And then also give the rest of the 11 children everything that they need.
Yes.
In class. So that's been my biggest challenge. And I like how Colorado video that you showed. And I found myself sitting in the corner one day with the notebook, just jotting everything I saw throughout the day. And that helped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And what she's saying is, you know, we've got a classroom of 12 kids, one of whom needs a lot of attention. And whether it's a child with special needs or not, oftentimes there's one child in my class who needs lots of attention. And when that kid's absent, someone else will fill that role. So how do we handle that? And I think it's a really good point is when I'm baffled about a child, I'm going to sit back for a little bit and just watch. And that's one of the points that we'll get into later. Children's behavior will tell us what they need. If we really watch and look what sets them off and look what makes them withdraw, their behaviors will tell us some of what they need. So observation is a great idea. I'm not sure if we answered the question that you had, Walt.
I think we did.
Okay.
I think we did.
Other suggestions on how to work with a whole classroom full of children, some of whom have challenges? Another thing that we've talked about is we talked about, you know, that classroom in the video that we saw had great engaging centers. If my classroom is really engaging, and if kids are active all around the center, all around the classroom, and they're busy, then I'm more likely to have the time to go over here to the book area and work on something specific with a child, or maybe go over here to the motor area and work on a child who's challenged motorically. If my classroom's really engaging and fun, I'm more likely to have a chance to spend individual. If my classroom is chaotic and it's noisy and it's not well organized and it's loud, then we're all going to be crazy all day long and I can't get to a child individually. So the more I can have that's engaging and fun and new, vary it, not too often, but vary it regularly, and my kids really be engaged, I'm more likely to have time to spend individually. And we can also ask for help. If I've got a child who's really challenging me, and I've had kids before who can like rip a room apart in a heartbeat, then that's when I know I have to ask for help. I have to have someone else come in and take all those kids out while I deal with this one child who's tantruming. That's happened before. Sometimes I have to ask for help, and sometimes the center can be creative and find for me the help I need. Sometimes they can't, but I can always ask for help when I've got that kind of a challenge. It's a really good point. Yes?
Non-aligned participant says, utilize the children in your class to help with others. They make good teachers.
That's a great idea.
And there's the thing too, this kid is a great helper.
That's great.
Knows our class routine, can teach the class if I sat down. But
yeah,
just following those routines is been a challenge.
Yeah. So you're learning some things that work. And that's a great suggestion, that the other kids in the class can be are great teachers and great helpers. Yes.
Another online participant suggested we use the buddy system. More advanced kids with less advanced, and bigger kids with smaller kids.
Great idea. Peer-to-peer support. It can start really early. We've all, there's lots of helpful little kids who will, herd another little child, who will push a child's wheelchair outside. There's lots of helpers. I mean, 3-year-olds are great helpers. Okay. Other ideas of some of the challenges that you've had? Let's think for a minute. When we started, I had you think about 2 children, okay? One of the children that you thought about, we screened. The second child who you thought about, who we didn't screen, do you have any idea how you're going to start working with that child? Like, I know with my little guy, Marcus, that I'm going to work on his motor skills and his social skills. The second little girl I'm thinking about, Zoe, I haven't done a screen on her. I really don't know what to do with her. Do you know what to do with your second child yet? And that's the point of a screen. If we haven't even screened, I don't know my children well enough to even really meet their needs. So we're going to look lastly at some of the ways that we can better include children with special needs in our centers. And we're going to look at 3 different ways of organizing the environment. There are so many resources for us out there in terms of how to best include children. We're just going to touch on a few today, and I emphasize that it's just a few. And you have tons of resources in your handout. There's lots of resources out there on the web, as well as great trainers who are available to help you with this. So we're going to talk briefly about how we can adapt the social environments to meet our kids' needs. The temporal or time environments. Time matters to children, and how quickly things change or how long things last matter, especially to kids with special needs. And lastly, we're going to look at some of the physical environments, ways that we can change our classroom and our home setting to be more appropriate for our children. I would recommend that you look at the back of your handout. There's a great handout from the IRIS Center on designing classroom environments. It gives you more ideas about some of the things we're talking about today. And do you feel equally prepared to think about planning for your child who you screened as your child who you didn't screen? Anybody feel equally prepared? If I haven't done any kind of screen, let alone assessment, I'm really at a loss for how to plan for my kids. So we're going to talk just briefly about some of the social environments. We create social environments either in our home settings or in our classrooms. And these are some of the things that we can consider. If I've got kids with special needs, for instance, with Marcus, he does better with small groups. So I'm going to avoid having large group activities. And when I do have a large group, I'm going to keep it short, because he just cannot attend that long. I'm going to have lots of things in my classroom that the children can pick what they do and where they go. As much as possible, I'm going to give them choice. He does much better if I don't try to funnel him into any one certain area. If I let him have choice, he does much better. I'm going to partner with his family and have them work with me to help me figure out what works for him and what doesn't work. And I'm going to use materials that he likes. If I find there's stuff that he loves, I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to expand on that, and I'm going to let go of the things that don't work. You know, there's some really obnoxious toys that kids love, like those things that you twirl around that make noise. I don't like them, but the kids love them. If the kids love them, I'm going to have them at my center. And I want to have modifications that include all children. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But socially, think about some of the modifications I can include. I might have, you know, adults come in who he loves. I might have grandparents come in. I might have pets come in. We have a week where we have dogs come in. The kids are so calm, assuming there's no one there with dog allergies. So I'm going to think how to modify the social environment to make it more comfortable for my kids who are challenged. And we're going to talk briefly about temporal or time-related parts of the environment. You know that there are some children who just lose it during transitions. And what we know is that I want to have a consistent schedule, yet flexible, because there's always going to be changes in a daily schedule. So I want to have a regular routine. I want them to know what's coming next, that we wash our hands before we sit down to the table. We wash our hands after we come in from outside. I want them to know the routine, yet I want to be flexible. So that if I've got a child who really loses it when it's time to put their coat on, I'm going to start giving him advance notice. In 2 minutes, we're going to get your coat on and give him a clue and let him be more flexible in the routines so that he doesn't lose it. And you know when your kids lose it. When you've watched them, you know what makes them get upset or withdraw. Those are the things I'm going to plan for. We know that some kids like really active times and some kids like really calmer times. And so I'm going to plan my schedule around what works for my children. And I've got some kids who need it really upbeat and some kids who need it slow. And I'm going to work my day so that they both get their needs met as much as possible. So lastly, we're going to talk about environments today and some of the ways that we can modify environments. So we're just going to look at some pictures together and talk about some of the things that you see in these pictures for ways to modify the physical environment to suit our children's needs. And we're going to talk today about ways we can modify the space, the comfort, the lighting and sound, and the display features. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg and some of the things that we can do to make our environments more inviting for children with special needs. This picture shows all 4 of those. You can see that there's space in this center. There's a space for a child in a walker or a wheelchair could move between those chairs. Those actually are child-size chairs and couch, so they're comfortable. They're also washable, which I really like, because when we've got little kids, we're always spilling stuff, so I want to have as much as possible stuff that's soft but yet washable. You can see that we've got carpet on the floor to make the sound softer, and we've got natural lighting coming in. So we've also got display. You can see in the back there, display items at the child's eye level. So this one picture shows all the different components of environment that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to look at some pictures together and tell me what you see here. What arrangements for space, either online or here, what do you see in terms of arrangements for space here? What have we done? And some of these are from places that you all may recognize. Some of these are from centers in Kentucky. What have we done for space here?
Using the outdoors.
Yeah, using the outdoors as a classroom. Those are both outdoors. Yes.
Caroline, thank you for addressing the accommodation and adaptations when modifying environments. You use the outdoors, create outside environments, nature as a base, eye level environments.
Great. Yep. What have we also done with the 2 children at the easel? What have we done there in terms of space to set up a safer way for children to paint? They're separated. They each have their own easel. They're not so close that they can like reach over and mess up the other's painting too much. It's a nice small group setup. Marcus will do really well here because there's only 2 kids there. It's not overwhelming where it's a noisy outdoor setting. You know, there's some sound buffering from the grass. It's a small group. He's got his own place to work. What do you see in this picture on the left? Have we modified the space there? Can you tell what that is? It's a vertical board with buckets for sorting. So what have we done with our space here?
You just made it bigger instead of sitting where they're more confined.
Yeah.
There's more room.
Yeah, it's bigger. There's more room. They're not confined. They can come and go because they're not sitting down. It's just a different angle on the world. Yes.
An online participant says they're on different levels.
Yes, they can be. They can be doing completely different tasks as they sort.
An online participant says enough space for larger movements.
Yes.
Outside open space. Is that child level?
Yep, it's at child level with space to move around.
More than one can sort.
Yes. So they could work independently or they could be working together, whichever the kids are able to do. Anything else that you see here in terms of space? You know, if either one of these kids were to get frustrated, they could simply walk away as a way to cope. And we can teach them that. You know, if you can't stand it that she's working with you on this sorting, you can walk away. We can teach them how to handle their frustration. Okay. Yes.
An online participant said together but separate.
Yes. And lots of kids, lots of adults need to play this way. So these are some of the things that we've seen in those pictures. In terms of space guidelines, we've looked at interest areas that are engaging for children, labeling shelves and bins with pictures as well as simple words, using materials to absorb sound. For kids with visual impairments, we might have certain textures in certain areas so that they know where they're going and where they are. Space for children with wheelchairs and walkers. The outdoor areas with accessibility for all. And separating quiet and noisy spaces. So that's some of the things we saw in those pictures. So let's look at these pictures where we've made some modifications for children's comfort. What do you see here?
Pillows.
Pillows. Yes.
Quiet areas.
Those are both quiet areas, aren't they?
Plenty of softness.
Yes.
Sunshine through the window.
Yeah, natural lighting.
These are on their level.
Yes, it's on their level. Yes. Yes. Right. Simulating nature. If we can't have the real thing, we can certainly have soft material that is from nature, trees and flowers. Yes.
A quiet area for children and a place to read on their own time.
Yes. So if I've got kids who need a quiet area when they get really keyed up, they can go over to that little bed and they can chill. Something else that I provide for my kids that they love is I'll take a shelf that's at the ground level and I'll empty it out and like just put a sheet or a blanket in there. And if they get overstimulated, they can go chill in the shelf. They love it. It's their own little confined space. Another thing I want to point out is as we provide softness and comfort, all of these things can be washed. Because about once a week I go through and I pull everything out and I wash it because they get dirty. So comfort, soft, and washable. If I can't wash something, I really don't keep it in my classroom because it's dirty. There you go. So these are some of the things that we've seen for comfort. Again, children can play alone or with a small group in any of these areas. We want to make sure that when children sit in chairs that their feet touch the floor. And if they don't, put something under there that's stable so that they are stable. We don't ever want kids' feet hanging, dangling. We can modify all the tools in our classroom. We can modify toothbrushes, spoons, paintbrushes. We can build up the handles or do whatever is needed so that all the kids can use them independently. I've seen instances where we use a cup on a paintbrush as the handle so that it's a bigger hold for children to hang on to. And if we have adaptive equipment for our children, any kind of adaptive equipment, whether it's splints or wheelchairs or feeding devices, we want to make sure that all of our staff know how to use it.